Kia ora koutou, welcome to our AAC SIG for this term around supporting AAC users who are Gestalt language processors. We will just start with our karakia. There we go. Okay. Kia ora, te marino, kia whakapapa, ponamu, te moana, hei hurahi, mā tātou i te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou i a tātou katoa, homie, huie, tai kia. So AA SIG Updates is our first thing on the agenda. Then we'll go into our hui topic, so the Gestalt language processing in the AAC, hosted by our lovely Shannon Hennig. We'll have some time to go into the breakout groups. We'll have some questions. You can also pop them up on the chat group, which our lovely Kit will be monitoring. And then we will do our closing karakia. Update our Google groups. We are having a few teething problems at the moment. We are trying to sort that out. We have a few emails bouncing back. So if you want to get in touch, if you just use the Aotearoa AAC SIG @gmail.com address, I think it is. We will try to wrap this up fairly on time today, because straight after this is the Athens AGM. And there's also a LAMP training coming up for Hamilton and Christchurch, which we've sent out the details for. And now I'll pass it off to the lovely Shannon. She is a private SLT who has a wealth of experience in AAC across both New Zealand and North America. And yeah, take it away, Shannon.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, let's see. Where did I had it loaded. Let me just get it back in presentation mode. I just took it out so I could, okay, this should work. I can do it. Nope, I'm sharing the wrong slide. Let me just try this one more time. So, kia ora koutou. Just to introduce you to myself, Hei ore ho no Ireland, no Germany, no Russia, I whanu mai o ki Oregon, which is on the west coast of North America. I raro I te maro o te monga o Mount Hood, ka tuku mihi o ki te awa o Gales Creek, ka tuku mihi o ki te moana o Netarts. Ko Fritz Hennig toku matua tupuna, who I'm very sure is neurodivergent from the stories that got passed down. Ko I Katarina Balzun Tokofaya Tupuna, who was instrumental in intellectual disability work in New York State. And out of all of her grandkids, including myself, we have autism, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, 2 brain surgeries, so our family has a few stories along the way. Ko Adrian Taku Tunane, who I think is not so neurodivergent, but he somehow puts up with all of us. And Ko Shannon Hennig Toku Inua. So, and many of you see me around. I've been in New Zealand since 2006, but if you don't kind of know my story, I grew up in like a wave where inclusive education was really relatively well done. And then I could pick classes where I could be a peer tutor, and then they'd handpick us to be TAs and support worker type camp counselors over the summer programs. And then I did TA work, and obviously I became a speech language therapist. And I've always wanted to do AAC and autism, and they all told me in grad school that was impossible. And they worked really hard to try to remove all of my neurodiversity, and they lost. And now I get to be me. So this is great. And I also clearly was a Gestalt language processor as a child. Like my first words were, "I'm mad at you guys." And so I was in speech therapy as a kid because I couldn't actually have the motor skills to say my long Gestalts. And I'm going to introduce you quickly to Zukit, who uses a lot of AAC, and so she's going to be along to keep me honest. So if I stray into anything that's not accurate, I have live feedback. So I thought I'd go through some of the things that I have found useful on my journey. I assume if you're here, you've heard of Gestalt language processing. It's dramatically changed my practice, and it's made things a lot easier. And I see a whole bunch of what I would kind of call like not like the traditional AAC users. Like I was trained thinking I was going to be seeing a whole caseload of people with Down syndrome and cerebral palsy and motor neuron disease. And yes, I'm glad that there are people who are really good at working with those groups. And I'm fine with that as well. I have the skills. But there was a whole group of kids who talked, but they were really hard to understand. And they didn't use their AAC devices the same way. And now I'm like, oh yeah, they were GLTP folks. So I'm just going to let you know, there'll be some times where I'm going to use these things and it'll come up later, but I'm just put that there so I can remind myself. Okay, so basically there's two approaches. A lot of people have both. But the way I describe it, because it's not intuitive to families, is there's the analytical folks and their brain is really, they want to start with all the individual units and all the pieces, and then they build up complexity. And that's how we're trained, right? You know, like they get a word, then the kid has 2 words, then 3 words. You know, after 50 single words, you start combining and you have the vocabulary explosion and all that stuff we get taught. And then there's the Gestalt approach where you start with the entire chunk. And a way that really helped me understand that was when I looked at the Gestalt psychology. And they're like, if I saw a picture of like a bicycle like that, I see it as a bicycle. But if I took the individual circles and the dot and the little squiggles and I broke them all out, I wouldn't see it as a bicycle. Like it's the whole that makes it have meaning. And then I just like the Lego analogy because some of us are really good at taking things apart and then putting them back together. And other people want to just start with them all broken apart. And some people like both. You can go to Marge Blank's. She has tons of free resources out there. The Meaningful Speech people have lots of great resources. This is how I tend to talk through it. I go, okay, so we know in the typical language development, you know, maybe 80% of people goes this way. And then there's the other approach. And they start with whole phrases, then they chop and change, then they free up and isolate individual words. And then they can use those words to combine and say anything they want generatively. And I use these phrases like, you know, they use chunks or whole phrases and chop and change because I think we understand that kind of chopping and changing bit, and that technical term mitigate doesn't resonate with all my phono that I know. I don't know about you. It works for me. I like technical language a lot, but I go that way. And then I have to point out in my practice that it doesn't matter if it's AAC based or not. People will panic because it'll feel like there's a regression or a loss of skill because the kids have beautiful long grammatical sentences and then they get all like these. It's such a good sign that they get these weird smashes together in stages 2 and 3, and then they're just talking in single words and everyone's like, I want sentences, and it's actually progress. So is it all right if I share how this from your point of view? Yeah, sorry, I'm not supposed to ask questions. I'm switching between Gestalt when I talk to you, like analytical, and then Zukit and I have a totally different conversational style, which I'm violating terribly now. So Zukit taught me that you can have totally different levels in different modalities. So when I met Zukit, you described to me that talking felt like glass, like you hated it. It was a very not pleasant, terrible experience, but sign language and augmentative communication felt really good. And you know, Zukit, you're at university, you have totally generative language when you type. So you can see kind of in the AAC space, you're well beyond level 4. Beautiful language, not that I assess it, but I can give very strong language. But when Zukit started to want and sought me out to help with like talking with your mouth, we found if we took a Gestalt approach, it felt like marshmallows, you said, like it felt good. But you were very much at level 1. And normally when Zukit and I are together, I just use AgCom, so we're even, but or a mix. But if I'm talking with you, I need to talk in sentences, they need to be Gestalts, and I need to not do a whole bunch of questions. And I also point out, like, no one's like a level 1 person, a level 2 person, a level 3 person. People will have a phrase that's level 1, and then it kind of starts breaking down, and it might be like coming right up to a store near you, and then later it's like coming right up, toilet time, coming right up, Taylor Swift's on the 5th of June. You know, it can be chopping and changing, and then it might become or right, and then you can put things together. And so I often, when I'm doing my reports, I'm thinking that through. But one of my challenges is with AAC, I don't have a language sample always of just speech to figure this out. But because I've been able to work with people and get to know people like you, Zuki, I've really figured out that it's not about phrases, it's about gestalts. It's like that bicycle. It has to be a complete whole. And it's finding that language that has that emotional meaning and intonation that makes sense to that communicator in a context. And it can't. I'll let Claire just mute other people.
Find out.
So that we can hear. All right. So, and it's about how it really sounds. So I have a student today where we went through in his device and we added all of his favorite theme songs. We had the theme song for Bing Bang. We had the theme song for Family Guy. And I just put it on YouTube and we programmed it together, and I took the video and he got to press record and stop. So it was the right section of that. I have no idea if you want the whole thing, the beginning, what part is the most important. And he can like scrub back and forth, no problem with YouTube. And that helps me get the right thing on his device. And Zuki, you pointed out the other day that I was making us saying something and I was trying really hard to stay in Gestalt, and I said something like, oh, something fell down, and it went plop, plop, plop. And you kindly pointed out, that makes no sense. Like it's not a thing. Like that's not the actual sound. Same way if I said tweet, 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 that's not what a bird actually says.
I said it was a fake sound.
It was a fake sound, very much. And I think we have to be careful that we are at risk of programming in fake sounds and fake things that don't fit. And with all AAC, there's a stage where we have such a vulnerable time because we have way too much power and responsibility because people are relying on us, not just us as speech therapists, but all the people with the hands that can easily program. Many people are relying on us for their words. So it's a big responsibility. And I can't pick gestalts for people. So what I was going to do first, though, is I always like to just like actually hear from the group. So what we're going to do is go on your phones. You can take a picture of this mini Menti. I think I have it. Just go to any web browser and type in menti.com. I'll do that on my phone as well to make sure it's working. That's always a way I can actually make sure. And then type in the code. Cool. Okay. So now I'll switch over to that. And you all, I'm just curious, what are some of the gestalts that you've been hearing from AAC users or other people? And we'll see. Let's just make sure that I actually opened it up. Oh, we have responses. Okay, there we go. Keep them coming. You got it, dude. Wow, I see. Oh my God. Hopperflies don't dance. Oh, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I have a kid who's like, say yes to Christmas. Always. Say yes to Halloween. Always. Say yes to full steam ahead. He just had a baby. Humming the intonation of counting, like, row, row your boat. Happy birthday to you. E-I-E-I-O. Like, share, and subscribe. Call the ambulance. There's a fire. Yeah, there's some who will whisper and mumble them, but you can hear the intonation. And I sing songs in other languages, and my pronunciation is terrible. Do you want to feed the birds? Let it go. And you can see I'm reading these with the Gestalt intonation that my head goes for. It could also be like, let it go, because it might be the way the parent says to the dog, let that go. And that's the intonation that comes, because in the context of like, stop holding that, get it out of your mouth, they'll say that one. Where I have another kid who will sing parts of Frozen to say that he needs a coat. So all of these sound like genuine gestalts to me. They sound like things that had emotion, they sound meaningful, like, share, and subscribe. They're repetitive in real life. What they don't see are things like, I want a, and so sometimes we think people will accidentally program things like, I don't like that. But I'm more likely to hear like, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin, or like, I told you once, I've told you twice. Those types of things are the way kids often who use Gestalt language, that's their level one. They don't say, I don't like it. That doesn't have enough pizzazz. All right. So now I'm curious, what are you as a group finding tricky about supporting, sorry for the typo, providing, supporting, encouraging, whatever role you have around AAC, what are you finding tricky? So, I mean, my doctoral work was all on voices, and I had to fight so hard with the speech synthesis people saying, we need expressive voices, not emotional voices. We need to be able to say the same thing in different ways, because let it go is different than let it go. Knowing what to program and what gestalts to include. The systems are very much set up for analytical learners, particularly the current ones. I think core boards, I can't make core boards work with my Gestalt language processors because like that it has to have the intonation, and I can't consistently model between enough people to have the right tone of voice. It's too compartmentalized and too much of like in boxes. I'm just putting my ATANS hat on again. We are at ATANS going to be making more lists of different people, different Cat 1 options out there, because we're all frantically between TalkLink and those of us in private practice and people at MOE, there's more and more people getting their Cat 1. And we just need to get through there's basically a countrywide wait list. So the more people who can see and get things put in place quicker, the better. Oh, the whole, they talk in sentences, we don't need a device. And I just kind of point out, there's always a today communication system. We just want to keep opening things up so they can be more specific. And I'm lucky because I often can leave devices for weeks at a time, and then they start saying, oh, that makes a difference. Oops, sorry, I was trying to scroll. What the initial goals should be. So when it comes to introducing the analytical side, it's a false dichotomy. We just want people communicating. So all my goals are increase rate of communication, increase the number of people they like to talk to and they have success talking to, within reason. Some people are small group, but if you only have 2 people, that's probably too small of a circle. Range of communication functions, how much are they delighting in language? How much are we limiting their language development? Yeah, so when it comes to the people who have very little speech, I find watching them on YouTube is a really great way to start figuring out what they're going to over and over again. I take a gesture dictionary and I think, okay, so they're doing this. So when they want to when they're excited, they jump up and down and go, wee! They really like this thing on Peppa Pig where this bird's flying and really happy. I'm going to take a clip of that and I'm going to steal that language to see if that's a Gestalt that fits. So I'm always thinking what are they already spontaneously communicating? Honor their today system, give them a tomorrow system that has more of a wordy Gestalt. Where to program it? I think this is such a hard question. And then long strings of the same word selection. Is it Gestalt? Is it just, I love that sound? It's hard to know. And I think that when you have a kid who naturally finds just verbal speech easy, it's not as hard to spot the Gestalt thinkers. If they're only using AAC or they have very little mouth speech, then it's a little bit trickier to figure out what's going on. And I kind of have to take that assumption, make the least dangerous assumption, and make sure both options are there. Okay.
There's a lot of those.
What was that?
Sorry, I was just going to raise the question. Could you just explain a little bit more on how you adjust your language when communicating with someone with Gestalt language processing? I didn't realize it was a mode of communication also.
Yeah, so like the first thing I would do, like if I was, can I have a quick chat with you? All right, so here's Suki. This is what I don't do. Prepare yourself for terror. I don't do, how are you? What have you been up to? Good to see you. I don't ask any questions. So it's a lot of me, like I'll always start with my own AAC device for someone like you. So I'm just trying to start with Gestalt to myself. So I'm just trying to find, I have just one of my Androids. So I might start with something like, make sure my volume's up. Oh, it's not.
My niece is cute.
My niece is cute. She's saying da 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 da, and gave me a frog. So I'm going to start with just statements.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're doing talking stuff, I'll be doing things where I'm just making things come to life, and I'm like, no, it fell again. Now, Sukeet's told me she needs the Gestalts to be 1 to 3, I mean like 2 to 3, 2 to 4, like really short. And my Gestalts, I naturally make too long because so many of my kids love long ones. So I have to adjust it. But it's a lot of me like being like, adding that like silly language, like whoops. And even if I know they can't say it back, you can say a lot back when it's flowing. But if I have a kid who can't, if they light up, if they laugh, I jot that down and I make sure that thing goes in the device. The same way a kid laughs because a dinosaur toy comes out, we're like, ooh, add that one. They've never said it. They've never showed interest in the symbol, but I see, oh, you love that thing. I'm going to put that in. I think the level 1 is one of the hardest stages because I'm constantly trying to think of how I just have to totally talk differently. So when we would talk, it'd be like, oh, feels weird. We're on the spot. But I might be like, oh, my band played last weekend. We were mostly in tune. Dawn was the best. And we get that kind of back and forth, but I'm never putting pressure on you. And then sometimes if I'm in like more language therapy, we found that there'd be like little catchphrases. Like once I said something like almost the same, identical, not, or it was like not quite identical. And I wrote them down and I would be like, oh, New Zealand and Australia. And you could be like,
Pretty close.
pretty close. Or I'd be like, dogs and cats. Not the same. Or 7-Up versus lemonade.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. But it can't be pretty, it has to be pretty close. It has a very specific thing. It's all linked in your brain.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes would pick up things because we noticed you didn't have a lot of opinion sharing. So I would just find, but I didn't want to be like, what do you think about this? How, no, that's a disaster. And then you tell me off very politely. So I'm curious what you all have been trying for solutions. I have like whole Pictello books that are just songs. And I have whole things of videos I've downloaded. Shh, don't talk to copyright owners. That I just keep in different albums because my students are always going to YouTube, but I want to have a non-online YouTube when I'm just doing my stuff. Let's see, is it still sharing? Does anyone else have any ideas? Yeah, Gestalt Communication Dictionary is huge. Because so many times it's really hard to get consistent responses to what people are saying. yeah, visual scene displays. I use those quite a lot with this group. Using the same frame cross context. Joining in, yeah. Creating random phrases in the moment. Yeah, and it's like any language therapy, it has to be in the moment. I can't come with with someone's like, I've just emailed you through a PDF of like the 15 board maker gestalts, and it's just a whole bunch of symbols that I know mean a million different things because I've had hundreds of different clients by this stage who use those symbols in different ways. Why can I not scroll? How can you scroll? Yeah, I use a lot of like perspective statements, and I always try to get to that equal power thing where we're doing both. So, and sometimes it can be something like I'll go to a device and it says please, and I'm like, well, how does that kid actually say please? Or what's the thing that they love? And if it's something where there's a show where they're like, oh, you always make the best cakes. That might be something that's under the please button. And I might have it something where it might have in parentheses, please, but not say it, and then has the whole thing so people can kind of figure out what does this kid mean. So the app almost becomes like a dictionary. So yeah. So I'm going to now go back to, I'm just going to check the chat if there was anything. So I'm going to now stop sharing and go and share my slides again. Right. So ways to support at different stages. I think that level 1 is the hardest, but across all of them, it's the same good AAC practice. It's the today versus tomorrow system. So the today system could be jumping, smiling, bringing you by the hand. So if you're being drugged by the hand and using a reenactment gesture, I had a kid who would reenact Pink Panther episodes, and he'd take all the people and move them around and reenact like, now you do this. And he was very angry. And it was so much easier when we just got the YouTube clips and he could show them exactly what he meant. So like everything, what is happening today? Honor it, respect it, encourage it, teach people what it means. And then how do you model a tomorrow system? Gesture dictionaries, which, it's just from the old days when we only had gestures. It should just be a communication dictionary, but that's the technical term in the literature. So, if Johnny says, coming right up to a store near you, it might mean I'm excited about that. When's the movie coming out? But it also, for this kid, means the word right, both hand direction right and also like correct. So if my 5 + 5 is 8, he's like not coming to a store near you. Or if it's like I say, is it this one right or wrong? He'll be like coming right up to a store near you, because he couldn't actually isolate the word right, but he could receptively, he was at that isolated word, but he wasn't expressively. And that's why we model a lot from, their point of view. So it's not you do this and I do all that, and lots of wait and processing times. And good, meaningful speech really pointed out how much silence you need. So people are playing, because if we're doing too much narrating, there's no silences for spontaneous anything. All right, so here are my metaphors I use a lot. If a kid or adult's at stage 1, I talk a lot about the sushi train. Not that we have them all through New Zealand, but I think you can find videos of them, and they are in Auckland. But it's just like these beautiful gestalts in context should be going around for kids to just grab and be like, "Ooh, I like that." So I was pushing a kid today, and I was like, "Up, up, and away. Give me a push already." And I was just coming up with lots of that were short within what he could say. And then if it was an AAC user, I would have a page where I would just be initially having lots of things so he could hear, you push this button, this very delightful, enticing, clear, gestalty thing comes out, and I can see what's going to happen. I also use the idea of like a hopper, because we have to have a whole bunch of language for kids to steal and use in level 1 that then they can like work through the other stages. It's not just what do they already have in level 1 and move them through. Like we have to be giving them language to steal to put in the hopper. I also use this, anyone who's worked with me knows how much I do this. I'd use this for all of my clients. but I imagine like an anchor. And if the word is like jump, then I might be going jump around the table. I'm not writing this necessarily for them. Jump up 5 times, jump like a monkey. I don't know. I'm thinking on the fly here. Or I might be like Shannon jump, Johnny jump, Jamie jump. And I'm doing that because if they already have a Gestalt, they can start seeing how you can chop and change. So sometimes I'll even have that on a device where I just have our photos and it has a whole bunch of things like Shannon sing, let it go, Jamie sing, let it go, so-and-so sing, let it go. And they can see how they can pick and choose that part. And they're building up that specificity and the power of language, which is different things smashed together lead to slightly different things. And in the old days, we had all of these devices, you know, before we got into the wonderful core vocabulary revolution, we had lots of these things. We had tons of things in the old days, like 20 years ago, it was a lot like, oh, could you bring me a iced coffee with 3 sugars? Could you bring me a Big Mac with small fries? It was a lot of that, which was not flexible. But there was a whole group of kids who took off because they happened to have this way of thinking. And then later, they just started typing it and doing it their own way, and they were fine. So I use the anchor technique a lot for modeling with speech, modeling with AAC, and sort of thinking through, for some activities, do we need to sometimes go back to like a topic page just to play around with that language? So they know, okay, so we on the Wheels on the Bus page has all that there, so I can just focus on how that works during Wheels on the Bus thing. But if you're a Gestalt language learner, you might think, oh, I need that word wiper, or I need like wah, wah, wah. I'm going to go through that the same way my kid goes to the one shelf where the one CD is that had song number 7 that happened before his first seizure. And when he feels that same electrical vibe in his brain, he goes to that same place, gets that same CD, he goes to number 7. He knows that pathway, which is very complicated. And that's how we started to learn. He could tell us if he was having an imminent seizure. Let's go back to my mouse. Mouse. So if we know what's important for like a palatable or even an enticing Gestalt, like it has to be emotional and intonation. We know all these things. So it is going to be different. We don't have to be so locked into like boxes and gritty things. It's more about how do we figure out he wants to say this. Let's give him some options to choose from. And it is going to be really messy. We do not have, I don't know, does anyone here, please speak up if you have found the perfect AAC system for Gestalt language. Like, I haven't found it yet. You have tried almost every single app. Sukit has literally, like, she took LAMP and like recreated, be as close to what Bruce Baker would have done. You reverse engineered that, like, perfect. And what these systems will look like, it just evolves. I don't know that it's possible to really well support a Gestalt language processor through this journey with intermittent assessments. I think it's just so dynamic and it's so much trial and error. I don't think we have a set pattern. That's just my anecdotal experience. Okay, so now I think it'd be a really good time to do some breakout rooms. So what I have done is I have, just before I do that, just number 1, stop asking people questions until they are like at least level 3 Gestalt, and they are starting to ask questions themselves. These are just kind of my rules of thumb. All right, but back here. So in the chat, I'm gonna switch over to this thing I did. I made a Google slide. And here's the tiny URL. So I'll pop that into the chat. What I suggest is we're going to throw you randomly, not me, not literally, and pop you into some breakout rooms. And you can discuss what tech's working, what vocabularies you find, what are the challenges, like whatever you want. And it looks like people have found the link. So I'm going to have Claire open up the breakout rooms And then you guys can have a little bit of a chat and brainstorm, because I'm not the only one who knows stuff. Welcome back, everyone. So what I'm just going to do real quick is pop back into here. Does anyone in group 1 have any key things they wanted to share with the group? Yeah, I just think it's really, really hard to pick random. It's just hard to get the right gestalts. And it's really hard to stop people asking questions.
Yeah, I think we kind of spoke about how like the challenges of then making Gestalt into like an app or into an AAC device as well, like the time that takes in order to program that and find the right app that works. But then like that the app generally is just down to that child or person's preference, and so you can't really say that one works the best. Yeah, and then I guess just thinking, are they using, and we spoke about that, like within emergent communicators, like using that intensive interaction style tends to be a really nice way of picking up phrases, and they might start copying or start using those phrases. But then sometimes the people that are working with that child, like the family or other people, because it's not that traditional language acquisition model, that they don't necessarily see it as a method of communication. They're like, no, you should be using like a single word or using 2 words together. And so trying to change like the wider opinion.
Yeah, I think it's almost impossible, I think, to get AAC right if they don't even get the concept of Gestalt to begin with.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at a couple things here to just drop my, when it comes to this say the word business, I always point out the whole thing is in a context. The only time you're saying say this word, that's not like how any interactions work. And then if you're seeing a lot of this Gestalty single word things, that often means we don't have enough words going into the hopper. So they're only picking up short words that have that Gestalty thing, like no way, gonna get you, or like stop it. I mean, those are like longer, but you get things like you get those Gestalty things like that. All right, so just mindful of time, I'm just going to go to the next page, next group. Yeah, it's just hard for them to identify gestalts, explain what they mean. And then with ESL and multilingual, how do you like put it all in one place? And I think sometimes we're fighting the systems and sometimes the systems are helping us. Anything that anyone from group 2 wants to share or ask? Cool. Talking about language, knowing where to start. It is really labor intensive. And that whole thing about getting an adequate language sample. And full disclosure, I have never fully followed like the meaningful speech whole thing of getting, I'm doing a lot of language sampling just on the fly. It's just kind of the way it goes. Anything else that group 3 wants to bring up to the group? Yeah, in my group, we were talking a little bit, like it doesn't have to just be traditional AAC. It can be talking picture books, things like that. Songs are really huge. The Go Talk, I've seen some really cool things with that. And I think you can keep that motor planning. Like motor planning is so important, but it is about like knowing where you're going to find things, but not having to like motor plan your way through like a bunch of different hoops to jump through. Visual scenes. And And I think we just need to own as a field that we're still trying to figure things out. Yep, SnapCore is a great app. Yeah. And the literacy thing, like we don't have time to dive all the way into that. So what I'm going to do at this stage, I'm just going to stop sharing and just double check that there wasn't anything else over here I wanted to go over. Let's see, I'm just going to, no, that was the end of that. So I'll wrap up there. I just thought that would be nice for us all to get together and just own that it isn't easy and we don't have any set answers. There are things that are definitely not what we want to be doing, which can be tricky. So with that, I will pass back to the organizers.
Shannon, we've just had one question in the chat that we haven't answered. Would you say then that the way vocabulary is arranged in AAC is different for Gestalt language processes, contrary to discouragement to compartmentalize vocabulary into many sets?
I think it kind of, this is a process, so I don't think there's anything set that the current defaults are impossible. Like I see the new Prolo can be really good for that stage 2, stage 3 to be able to be like, I can program one button and it leads to all the things that would fill that slot. Like I'm going to go to, I need a, in the early stages, I think we might be sometimes, and this is, I don't have the research on it. This is just what I'm seeing in my practice, kind of integrating everything I know from different things. I think a whole bunch of grids sorted by parts of speech is maybe not the way a lot of these brains organize words. It might be more organized by experiences or, and they might be things in different places. And these are kids who know how to drag people to the fridge on the porch versus this place, but like they know where different things are. Like there's lots of ways. So I think that it is really takes a lot of clinical thinking and nuance and teamwork to figure out what to do in those level 1, entering level 1 stages. I don't think a whole bunch of like, we're going to go to the verb page under like the letter D, or like we're going to look at vehicles. I'd start with it. If it's not working, then I try something else. And maybe we go into the vehicles, but there's a Gestalt next to each one. We have to be really creative. I don't see any of the sets where I've just like grab it off the shelf and run with it. Whereas there are some kids that I can grab, Prolo or Touch Chat or LAMP or whatever, or Speak First. And I can grab them and like, it just works for these kids. And I can give them 3 and they figure it out like on their own. But for the Gestalt kids, I have to be a little bit more creative. So that's me for now. If anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to set something up next year and we can do some more.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. I think we can agree that was just really informative and inspiring to hear how you work with our Gestalt language learners with AAC. Share my screen again. So all of the links and resources we'll email them out to the group in the Term 3 holidays. Our next SIG will be on the 16th of November at 1 o'clock around AAC research coming out of Aotearoa. And we have our closing karakia, which is Te whakahaere te tapu ke wātea Aotearoa, ke te ruki whakataha ai, ke te ruki whakataha ai, homie huie takie. Thank you, everyone.